The air in the ready room was cold and smelled of cleaned metal. Jay sat on a bench, checking his gear for the third time. His helmet was on the bench next to him, polished to a bright shine. Across the room, Mina was stretching. She reached for her toes, her movements smooth and calm. She did not look nervous. Jay thought she should look more nervous. Today was an important test. A door slid open with a quiet hiss. Captain Park walked in. He was not a tall man, but he stood very straight. His eyes moved from Jay to Mina, checking them without saying a word. Jay immediately stood up, his back straight. Mina finished her stretch and then stood up too, her posture respectful but more relaxed. "The shuttle is ready," Captain Park said. His voice was even and clear. "This is not a complex mission. It is a standard survey. But it is your final test before you become full officers. I will be watching. Everything you do will be noted. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," Jay said, his voice loud and firm. "Yes, sir," Mina said, her voice quieter but just as clear. "Good," said Captain Park. "Then let's begin." They walked single file into the shuttle. It was a small, boxy ship meant for short trips. Jay took the pilot's seat. Mina sat beside him. Captain Park sat behind them in the observer's seat. The controls lit up with a soft blue light. Jay's hands moved over them with confidence. He was an excellent pilot. He knew all the rules and followed them perfectly. The shuttle bay doors opened, showing the blackness of space ahead. Jay guided the shuttle out smoothly. Behind them, their mothership, the KSS Sentinel, grew smaller. Its lights looked like tiny stars. Their destination was a small, rocky planet called CY-77. It was a dead world with no life. Its only purpose was for training missions like this one. They were to fly over the surface, scan for certain minerals, and land at a marked spot to take a physical sample. It was all very simple. For Jay, it was about doing everything by the book. He liked the book. The book kept you safe. After a quiet trip, the planet filled their view. It was a dull red color like rust. Jay flew the shuttle into the atmosphere. The ship shook a little, but he kept it steady. They broke through the clouds and saw the land below. It was a desert of red rock and deep canyons. "Beginning primary scans," Jay said. He pressed a series of buttons. A low hum filled the shuttle as the scanners worked. Mina watched the screen that showed the scan results. "The readings are normal," she said, "just as the briefing said they would be." Jay nodded. Proceeding to the landing zone. He flew the shuttle low over the canyons. The landing zone was a flat area near a large cliff. It was a safe, open space, perfect for a landing. As they got closer, a small light on the control panel started to blink. It was yellow, a warning. "What is that?" Mina asked, leaning forward. "It's nothing," Jay said. "A minor sensor ghost. The atmosphere here sometimes causes false readings." He checked the manual on his screen. "Yes, see? It is a known issue. We can ignore it." Mina looked at the warning light. She did not like ignoring things. "Should we not run a diagnostic check? Just to be sure." "That is not the procedure for a known atmospheric effect," Jay said, his voice confident. "It would waste time. The mission parameters are clear. We land at the designated zone." Captain Park, from the back, said nothing. He just watched. Jay guided the shuttle towards the flat ground. They were only 100 meters up. Then, a different alarm sounded. This one was loud and sharp. A red light flashed on the console. "Proximity alert," Mina said, her eyes wide. "There is something directly below us." "Impossible," Jay said, his hands gripping the controls. The scans showed it was clear. He pulled back on the controls, making the shuttle climb. But it was too late. A bright blue beam of light shot up from the ground. It hit the bottom of the shuttle. There was a loud bang, and the whole ship shuddered violently. Warning lights flashed everywhere. The engine whined and then went quiet. "We have lost main power," Jay shouted, his voice tight with panic. "The stabilizers are offline." The shuttle started to fall. It was not a clean fall. It was a tumble. Jay fought with the controls, but they were dead. The ground rushed up to meet them. "Brace for impact," Mina yelled. The shuttle hit the ground with a terrible crunch of metal and rock. It skidded across the red dirt, throwing up a huge cloud of dust. It slammed into the side of the canyon wall and finally came to a stop, tilted on its side. For a moment, there was only silence, broken by the sound of hissing steam and cracking hot metal. Jay groaned. He was strapped into his seat. His head hurt. He looked over at Mina. She was already moving, unstrapping her harness. "Are you hurt?" she asked him. I am okay," Jay said, shaking his head. "What happened?" "We were shot down," Captain Park said from the back. He had a small cut on his forehead, but he seemed fine. His voice was calm, which made Jay feel even more ashamed. "That was not a training exercise. That was a real attack." The three of them climbed out of the broken shuttle through a side hatch. The air outside was dry and thin. The red dust settled around them. Their shuttle was a wreck. One wing was torn off. The engine was smoking. "Who shot us down?" Jay asked, looking at the sky. It was empty. "I do not know," Captain Park said. "But we need to find shelter and assess our situation. Our emergency beacon is active, but help will take time to arrive." Mina was not looking at the sky. She was looking at the ground. She walked a few steps away from the wreck and pointed. "Look, on the red dirt were tracks. They were not made by any human vehicle. The tracks had 3 long toes like a giant bird, and they were fresh." "This is a restricted planet," Jay said. "There is no intelligent life here. The surveys were clear." "The surveys were wrong," Mina said simply. They heard a sound. It was a low, clicking noise. It came from behind a large rock formation. Captain Park held up his hand for silence. He slowly reached for the small pulse pistol on his hip. From behind the rocks, a creature stepped out that it was tall, much taller than a man. It had long, thin legs and arms. The skin was a pale gray color. It had a large head with big black eyes that showed no emotion. It held a long, rifle-like weapon in its hands. The weapon was pointed at them. Then, more of them appeared. 5, then 10. They moved silently, surrounding the wrecked shuttle and the 3 humans. They made no sound except for the soft click of their joints. Jay felt his heart pounding in his chest. He had never seen anything like this. It was not in any of his training manuals. He did not know what to do. One of the creatures, who seemed to be the leader, took a step forward. It made a series of complex clicking sounds. A small device on its chest then spoke in a flat, robotic voice. "You are prisoners," the voice said. "You will come with us. Do not resist." Captain Park looked at his 2 cadets. He saw the fear in Jay's eyes. He saw the focused calm in Mina's. He knew they were in terrible danger. Their training mission had just become a fight for survival. And he knew that the book Jay loved so much had no rules for this. The tall gray creatures moved closer, their weapons held ready. The one with the speaking device clicked again. "Your weapons are useless. Drop them." Captain Park looked at the pulse pistol in his hand. It was a small sidearm meant for emergencies. The aliens had long rifles. He made a quick decision. He slowly bent down and placed the pistol on the red dirt. He nodded to Jay and Mina. They had no weapons to drop. "Good," the robotic voice said. "Now you will walk." The aliens formed a circle around them and started moving. They did not touch the humans, but their meaning was clear. They were to follow. Captain Park walked in front, his back straight. Jay followed, his mind racing, trying to remember any training for this situation. There was none. Mina walked last, her eyes not on the aliens but on the ground, memorizing the path they were taking. They were led towards the large cliff face. As they got closer, Jay saw a cleverly hidden opening in the rock. It was a door made to look like part of the canyon wall. It slid open without a sound, revealing a dark tunnel inside. The air that came out was cold and smelled of chemicals. The tunnel was lit by a dim blue light. It went down deep into the ground. They walked for a long time. The only sounds were the soft steps of the humans and the quiet clicks of the aliens. Jay tried to count his steps, but he lost count after a few hundred. He felt a growing sense of dread. They were deep underground, and no one knew where they were. Finally, the tunnel opened into a large cavern. It was not a natural cave. The walls were smooth metal. The ceiling was high. In the center of the cavern were several large, cage-like structures made of a glowing blue energy. Inside one of the cages, Jay saw other figures. They were humans wearing the uniforms of a different ship. They looked tired and thin. The aliens led Captain Park, Jay, and Mina to an empty cage. The leader made a clicking sound, and the glowing blue wall of the cage vanished. The robotic voice spoke. "Enter." They stepped inside. The energy wall snapped back into place with a low hum. It felt staticky and made the hair on Jay's arms stand up. The aliens left without another word, their footsteps fading into the darkness of the cavern as soon as they were gone. The humans in the next cage came closer to the energy wall that separated them. There were 3 of them. A man with a gray beard, a woman with short hair, and a younger man who looked very scared. "Captain Park?" the gray-bearded man said, his voice rough. "Is that you?" Captain Park squinted. "Chief Engineer Quan? From the Morning Star? Your ship was reported lost 3 months ago." Quan gave a tired laugh. "Lost? We were taken. Just like you." He gestured to the cavern around them. "Welcome to the collection." "What is this place?" Jay asked, his voice shaky. "Who are they?" "We call them the Collectors," the woman with short hair said. She introduced herself as Specialist Lee. "They don't talk to us. They just take people. They seem to be studying us." "Studying us?" Mina asked quietly. Lee nodded. "They test us. They want to see what we can do." how we fight, how we think. She looked down. Some of us don't come back from the tests. Jay felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. This was a nightmare. Captain Park looked around the cavern. There were about a dozen cages, but only 2 were occupied. Are you the only ones left? From our crew? Yes, Quan said. There were 10 of us. Now it's just us 3. The others failed the tests. What kind of tests? Jay asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. Before Quan could answer, a door slid open on the far side of the cavern. 2 collectors walked in. They stopped in front of the cages. Their large black eyes scanned the prisoners. One of them pointed a long, thin finger towards Jay's cage. The robotic voice spoke from its chest device. You, the new male, you will come. They were pointing at Jay. Jay's blood ran cold. He took a step back. No. The collector did not repeat itself. The other one raised its rifle and pointed it at Captain Park. The meaning was clear. If Jay did not come, they would hurt the captain. Go, Cadet, Captain Park said, his voice low. Observe everything. Learn. That is an order. Jay looked at Mina. Her face was serious, but she gave him a small, quick nod. He took a deep, shaky breath. He walked to the edge of the cage. The energy wall vanished. The collectors grabbed his arms. Their grip was cold and strong. They led him away through the door. The door led to a long, white hallway. It was clean and bright, unlike the dark cavern. They walked past several closed doors. Jay tried to see inside them, but he could not. Finally, they stopped at one door. It opened, and they pushed him inside. The room was a large, white circle. In the center of the room was a single, small table. On the table was a complex puzzle made of interlocking metal rings. It looked like an old child's toy, but much more complicated. A voice came from a speaker in the ceiling. It was the same robotic voice. Solve the puzzle. You have 5 minutes. Jay walked to the table. His hands were trembling. He picked up the metal rings. He was good at puzzles. He liked logic and order. This was something he understood. He started to work, his mind focusing on the problem. He twisted one ring, then another. He saw a pattern. It was difficult, but it was not impossible. After 4 minutes, he found the final move. The rings came apart in his hands. Puzzle solved. The voice said. There was no praise, no emotion. The door to the room opened. The 2 collectors were waiting. They took him back to the cage. When the energy wall closed behind him, he let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. What happened? Mina asked immediately. It was a puzzle, Jay said, still feeling shaky. A logic puzzle. I solved it. In the next cage, Engineer Quan sighed. The physical test is always next. Be ready. Jay did not like the sound of that. A few hours later, the collectors returned. This time, they pointed at Mina. The new female. You will come. Mina did not hesitate. She walked calmly to the edge of the cage. The wall dropped and the collectors took her. They led her down the same white hallway. But they did not take her to the puzzle room. They took her to a different room. This room was also a white circle. But it was empty. The voice from the ceiling spoke again. Target will appear. You will be given a tool to strike it. Do not miss. A section of the wall slid open. A round, red disc, about the size of a dinner plate, shot out. It flew across the room in a straight line, moving fast. At the same time, a metal rod, about as long as her arm, was dropped from the ceiling. It clattered on the floor at her feet. Mina picked up the rod. It was heavy and solid. The red disc was already bouncing off the far wall and coming back towards her. She did not run. She did not panic. She watched the disc. She saw its speed. She saw its path. As the disc flew towards her, she took one small step. She swung the rod like a baseball bat. She hit the disc right in the center with a loud clang. The disc flew straight back across the room and hit the wall where it had come from. It fell to the floor, broken. The room was silent. Then, the voice spoke. Test complete. The door opened. The collectors were there. They took her back to the cage. When she returned, Jay looked at her with questions in his eyes. What did they make you do? He asked. They made me hit a target, she said simply. She sat down in a corner of the cage and closed her eyes, as if she was resting. Captain Park watched her. He saw that she was not just resting. She was thinking. She was planning. Later, more food was brought. It was a bland paste in a tube. It was not tasty, but it was food. As they ate, they heard a new sound. It was the main door to the cavern opening again. This time, 4 collectors entered. They were not alone. They were leading a new prisoner. It was a big man with broad shoulders. His uniform was torn, and he had a cut on his face. He looked angry. He was fighting against the collectors, but their grip was too strong. The collectors pushed him into the empty cage next to Mina's. The energy wall closed. The new man slammed his fists against the glowing blue energy. "Let me out," he yelled. His voice echoed in the cavern. The collectors ignored him and left. The man turned and looked at the other prisoners. His eyes were wild. "Who are you people?" he demanded. "We are prisoners, just like you," Captain Park said calmly. "I am Captain Park. This is Cadet J and Cadet Mina. What is your name, soldier?" The man took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "Sergeant Choi," he said. "My patrol ship was ambushed in the asteroid belt. They took my whole crew." His face fell. "I think I am the only one left." "We are sorry," Captain Park said. Sergeant Choi looked around the cage. "How do we get out of this thing?" "We have tried," Engineer Kwan said from the other cage. "The energy walls are too strong. Nothing we do affects them." Choi was not listening. He was looking at the ceiling of his cage. There was a small ventilation grate, just big enough for a person to squeeze through. It was high up, but not too high. "Maybe we can't go through the wall," Choi said, a new energy in his voice. "But maybe we can go over it." Everyone looked up. The grate was made of metal, not energy. It was a weakness. "But the wall goes all the way to the ceiling," Jay said, pointing. The glowing blue energy met the solid rock of the ceiling. There was no gap. "Not if we turn it off," Choi said with a grim smile. He reached into a hidden pocket in his torn pants. He pulled out a small, twisted piece of metal. It was a broken piece of his ship, a sharp shard he had hidden. "When they brought me in, I saw the power source for the cages. It's on the wall over there." He pointed to a dark corner of the cavern where a large, humming box with glowing cables was attached to the wall. "If we can get to that, we can shut it down," Choi said. "But how do we get out of the cage to do that?" Jay asked. Choi looked at the ventilation grate above his head. "We don't get out. We get up." He jumped, grabbing the metal bars of the grate. He was strong. He hung there, his feet dangling. Then he started to pull. The grate groaned. It was not welded shut, only held by old rusty screws. With a loud screech, the grate came away in his hands. He dropped to the floor, holding the metal grate. He looked up at the dark hole in the ceiling. It was a tight fit, but it was a way out. "A way to what?" Captain Park asked, his voice cautious. "We are deep underground. We don't know where that leads." "It leads to a fight," Sergeant Choi said, his eyes burning with anger. "And that is better than sitting in a cage, waiting to be tested to death." The cavern was silent except for the low hum of the energy cages. All eyes were on Sergeant Choi and the dark hole in the ceiling. Hope was a dangerous feeling in this place, but it was now flickering in the dim light. Captain Park was the first to speak. His voice was a quiet whisper. "This is a great risk, Sergeant." Choi nodded, his face serious. "Staying here is a greater risk, Captain. They are taking us apart piece by piece. First our minds, then our bodies. I will not wait for my turn." In the next cage, Engineer Kwan spoke up. "The ventilation shaft will be a maze. You will get lost." "Maybe," Choi said. "But I have a good sense of direction. And it is better than this cage." Jay felt his heart beating fast. This was against all the rules. It was reckless. But looking at the determined face of Sergeant Choi, he felt a strange pull. He was tired of being afraid. "What is your plan?" Mina asked. Her voice was calm. As always, Choi pointed with his chin towards the power box in the corner. "I go through the shaft. I find a way to get above that power box. I drop down, break it, and the cage is open. Then we fight our way out." "It is a simple plan," Captain Park said. "Simple plans often have the best chance. But you cannot do it alone. I will go with him." The words came from Jay. He surprised himself by saying them. Everyone looked at him. He stood up straighter. "I am not as strong as you, Sergeant, but I am quiet, and I can help." Choi looked at Jay, really looked at him for the first time. He saw the fear in the young cadet's eyes, but also a new strength. He nodded. "Good. We go together." They did not waste any more time. Choi jumped up first, his strong arms pulling him easily into the dark shaft. He reached a hand down. "Come on." Jay took a deep breath. He jumped. His fingers caught the edge of the hole. He was not as strong as Choi and he struggled. For a terrible second, he thought he would fall. Then Choi's hand closed around his wrist and pulled him up with a powerful tug. Jay scrambled into the shaft. It was dark and tight, made of cold metal. It was full of dust, and the air was stale. He could only see a little light from the cavern below. Choi pointed ahead. "This way, towards the power box." They started to crawl. The metal was loud under their hands and knees. Every sound seemed to echo. Jay tried to be as quiet as he could. He followed Choi's boots. The shaft went straight for a while, then turned left. They passed other grates, looking down into empty rooms and dark hallways. After a long time crawling, Choi stopped. He pointed down through a grate. Below them was the cavern with the cages. They had gone in a circle. They were directly above the power box now. It was about a 3-meter drop. Okay? Choi whispered. This is it. I will drop down. You stay here. If I fail, you go back. Tell the others what happened. Jay shook his head. No. I am coming with you. Choi looked like he would argue. But then he saw the look on Jay's face. He nodded. Okay. On my signal. Below, the other prisoners were watching the shaft opening. Captain Park and Mina stood near the energy wall. Ready. In the other cage, Kwon, Lee, and the young man watched with wide eyes. Choi took his sharp piece of metal and started working on the screws of the grate. They were rusty and hard to turn. He worked slowly, carefully. The only sound was the scraping of metal on metal. Finally, the last screw came loose. Choi carefully lifted the grate and set it aside. The hole was open. He looked at Jay, then swung his legs down and dropped. He landed on the floor with a soft thud. He immediately crouched, looking around for guards. The cavern was empty. He looked up and waved. Jay took a deep breath. He closed his eyes for a second, then dropped down. He landed less gracefully, stumbling forward, but Choi caught him. Now the box, Choi whispered. The power box was a large, gray unit on the wall. Thick cables, glowing with blue energy, snaked out of it and into the floor, connecting to the cages. There was a control panel on the front, but it was sealed shut. Choi did not try to understand it. He raised his sharp metal shard. With a powerful grunt, he stabbed it into the center of the box and pried it open. Sparks flew out, bright and hot. Inside was a complex mess of wires and crystals. Which one? Jay asked, his voice tight. Does it matter? Choi said. He grabbed a handful of the glowing blue cables and pulled with all his strength. The result was instant and dramatic. A loud bang echoed through the cavern. A flash of bright blue light erupted from the box. The hum of the energy cages stopped. The glowing blue walls flickered, then vanished completely. They were free. For a moment, no one moved. It was too good to be true. Then Captain Park was the first to step out of his cage. Move! Quickly! Mina was right behind him. They ran to the other cage where Kwon and his crew were. The three of them stumbled out, their faces full of shock and hope. Which way out? Specialist Lee asked, her eyes scanning the dark cavern. The way they brought us in, Captain Park said, pointing to the large tunnel entrance. It is our only known path. They ran towards the tunnel. But they had only taken a few steps when a loud alarm began to blare. Red lights flashed from the ceiling. A deep, robotic voice boomed through the cavern. Containment breach. Security protocol activated. The main door to the cavern, the one they were running towards, began to slide shut. No! Sergeant Choi yelled. He ran faster, but he was too far away. The heavy metal door closed with a final, deep thud. They were trapped inside again. Back to the cages, Jay shouted, panic in his voice. But as he said it, two other doors, which they had not noticed before, slid open on the opposite side of the cavern. From each door, 3 collectors emerged. They were different this time. They wore dark gray armor on their chests and shoulders. Their weapons were not pointed at the floor. They were pointed at the humans. The 6 aliens moved forward, their movements perfectly in sync. They formed a half-circle, cutting off any escape. Captain Park looked at his small group. They had no weapons. They were trapped. He felt a heavy weight of failure. They had come so close. Sergeant Choi did not surrender. He raised his metal shard like a knife. Well, he said, a fierce smile on his face. Now we fight. The collectors stopped. They did not fire. The one in the center, the one with the speaking device, clicked. Its robotic voice filled the cavern. Physical combat test. Begin. This was not an escape attempt to them. This was just another test. The collectors did not move. They waited. It was an invitation, or a challenge. Captain Park understood. They were not being executed. They were being given a chance to perform, to show what humans could do in a fight. Their survival depended on passing this test. Form a circle, Captain Park ordered quietly. Back to back. Do not let them separate us. The 7 humans moved together. Captain Park, Choi, and Kwon stood at the front. Jay, Mina, Lee, and the young man, whose name was Kim, stood behind them. For a long moment, no one moved. The humans breathed heavily. The collectors were silent and still. Then, as if a switch was flipped, the collectors attacked. They did not use their guns. They used their hands and feet. They were fast, incredibly fast. One of them lunged at Sergeant Choi. Choi swung his metal shard. The collector moved its head to the side, avoiding the blow easily. It grabbed Choi's arm and twisted. Choi cried out in pain and dropped the shard. The collector threw him to the ground. Another collector went for Engineer Kwon. Kwon was a strong man, but he was not a fighter. The collector struck him in the chest with a closed fist. Kwon stumbled back, Gasping for AI or .it was a hopeless fight. The humans were outmatched in every way. The collectors were stronger, faster, and knew how to fight. Jay watched in horror as his comrades fell. He saw Specialist Lee try to kick a collector, but it caught her leg and pushed her away like she was a child. He saw young Kim curl into a ball on the floor, protecting his head. Fear froze Jay. He could not move. He saw a collector coming towards him. Its large black eyes were empty. It reached for him. Then, something changed. The collector going for Jay suddenly stopped, tilted its head. It was looking past Jay. Jay turned his head. Mina was standing there. She had not moved from her spot in the circle. She was perfectly calm. Her hands were open at her sides. The collector that had been moving towards Jay now changed its direction. It moved towards Mina. It was curious. This human was not afraid. It was not fighting. It was just waiting. The collector reached out a long arm to grab her. Mina moved. It was not a wild dodge. It was a smooth, flowing motion. As the collector's hand came near, she stepped inside its reach. She was so close to it now. She grabbed its extended arm with both hands. She turned her body using its own momentum against it. She did not try to overpower it. She redirected it. The collector was thrown off balance. It was a simple judo throw, but it was executed perfectly. The tall, powerful alien stumbled forward and fell to one knee. For the first time, there was a reaction from the other collectors. They stopped their attacks. They all turned to look at Mina, their heads tilted in unison. It was a gesture of pure, uncomprehending surprise. The fallen collector stood up. It made a low, clicking sound. It was not angry. It was intrigued. It moved towards Mina again, this time more carefully. It threw a fast, straight punch at her face. Mina did not block the punch. Blocking such strength would break her arm. Instead, she moved her head just a few centimeters to the side. The fist whistled past her ear. At the same time, her own hand shot out. She did not make a fist. She used the stiffened fingers of her hand, like a spear. She struck the collector precisely on the side of its long neck. The creature made a gurgling sound and staggered back, clutching its throat. It was not a deadly blow, but it was a damaging one. It was a blow that targeted a weakness. A complete silence fell over the cavern. The other humans stared, their mouths open. The collectors stood perfectly still, their weapons lowering slightly. The lead collector with the speaking device took a step forward. Its large black eyes were fixed on Mina. Clicked several times. The robotic voice that came out was slow, as if the machine was struggling to find the right words. That movement was not in the data. Explain. The robotic voice hung in the air. Explain. All movement in the cavern had stopped. The other collectors watched Mina, their weapons now pointed at the ground. The humans who had been fighting slowly got to their feet, their eyes wide with shock and new hope. Sergeant Choi wiped blood from his lip, staring at Mina as if he was seeing her for the first time. Mina did not look at the lead collector. She looked at Captain Park. He gave her a single, small nod. It was permission to speak, to play for time. She turned her calm gaze back to the alien. "It is an old art," she said, her voice even. "It is not about being stronger. It is about using your enemy's strength against them. You are very strong. That makes you predictable." The collector was silent for a moment, processing. "Predictable?" The voice repeated. This was a new concept in this context. "You expect us to meet your force with our own," Mina continued. She took a slow step forward. The collectors did not stop her. They were too curious. "You have data on how we punch, how we kick. You know how to counter all of that. But you have no data on this, because it is not an attack. It is a conversation." She moved her hands slowly in a circular pattern in front of her. It was a basic Tai Chi movement. The collectors' heads tilted in unison, their black eyes following her hands. "This is illogical," the robotic voice stated. "Combat is about efficiency, maximum force." "Is it?" Mina asked. She stopped her hands. "Then why am I still standing, and your soldier is hurt?" The lead collector looked at the one still clutching its throat. It made a series of rapid, soft clicks. Then it turned back to Mina. "Demonstrate." It was not a request. It was an order. Mina knew this was the most dangerous moment. She had their attention, but one wrong move would end it. "I cannot demonstrate alone. I need a partner." The lead collector took a step forward. It was taller than the others. Its gray skin seemed to gleam under the red alarm lights. "I will be your partner." A wave of fear went through the humans. This was their leader, undoubtedly bigger and stronger. Captain Park tensed, ready to shout a warning, but he stayed silent. He trusted his cadet. Mina simply bowed her head slightly. "As you wish." The alien leader stood before her. It did not take a fighting stance. It just stood there, confident in its overwhelming power. Begin. Its voice box said that IT reached out to grab her, just as the first one had. Its movement was faster, more precise. Mina did the same thing. She stepped inside its reach. She grabbed its arm. She started the motion of the throw. But this collector was ready. It anticipated her. As she tried to pull it off balance, it resisted with immense strength. Its other hand shot out, aiming to crush her shoulder. Mina did not fight the resistance. She flowed with it. Instead of pulling it forward, she pushed down on its arm and spun her body under it. She became a whirlwind of motion at its feet. The collector, expecting a push, was confused by the sudden lack of resistance. Its balance shifted for a fraction of a second. That was all Mina needed. As she completed her spin, she was behind it. She did not try to hit it. She kicked the back of its knee, not hard, but precisely. The joint buckled. The tall alien leader stumbled forward, one knee hitting the hard ground. A sharp, collective click came from the other collectors. It was a sound of pure alarm. The leader slowly got back to its feet, turned to face Mina. There was no anger in its posture. The big black eyes seemed to be studying her with a new, deep intensity. It did not speak for a long time. The data was incomplete, the robotic voice finally said. The tone was flat, but the words were profound. You do not fight with muscle. You fight with physics. Yes, Mina said. The lead collector looked from Mina to the other humans. It saw Sergeant Choi's defiant stare. It saw Captain Park's calm authority. It saw Jay, who was no longer frozen in fear, but watching with a spark of understanding. You are not a uniform species, the voice stated. You are a species of exceptions. Turned and clicked to the others. The alarm lights stopped flashing. The blaring siren went silent. The main door to the cavern, the heavy one that had sealed them in, slid open with a deep rumble. The humans stared, not believing what they were seeing. You are free to go, the robotic voice said. No one moved. It had to be a trick. Why? Captain Park asked, his voice firm. The lead collector looked at him. The test is over. The result is recorded. You have shown a variable we did not predict. A variable we cannot control. To keep you is illogical. You are a contamination to our data. It was the coldest form of dismissal Jay had ever heard. They were not being released out of mercy or respect. They were being let go because they were a nuisance, a bug in the system. Take your damaged ship and leave this planet, the collector said. Do not return. The collectors then turned and walked away, disappearing through the side doors. They were gone. The cavern was empty except for the 7 humans and the open door to freedom. For a full 10 seconds, no one spoke. The silence was heavier than the alarm had been. Then, Sergeant Choi let out a low laugh. Well, I'll be damned. They moved quickly, afraid the collectors would change their minds. They ran through the large tunnel, retracing the path they had been forced to walk when they were captured. The tunnel seemed shorter now. Soon, they saw a circle of daylight. They emerged from the cliff face, blinking in the harsh red sunlight of CY-77. The wreck of their shuttle was still there, a sad, broken shape in the distance. We need to get to the comms, Captain Park said. We need to call for help. As they started walking towards the shuttle, a low humming sound filled the air. A small, disc-shaped ship, no bigger than a room, descended from the sky and landed softly near them. It was a collector ship. A door slid open. The humans froze, thinking they had been tricked after all. But no collectors came out. Instead, a ramp extended to the ground. The ship was empty. A small, handheld device was thrown from the open door. It landed at Mina's feet. It was a communication device. The robotic voice they knew so well came from it. A transport. For your inconvenience, the voice said. The data has been valuable. The message ended. The device went dark. The small ship sat there, waiting for them. Engineer Kwan looked at the ship, then at the wreck of their shuttle. It is a much better option. Captain Park nodded slowly. He looked at the collector ship with deep suspicion, but also with practicality. Everyone on board. Now, they climbed into the ship. The inside was bare with simple seats. The controls were strange, but Jay, as the pilot, found they were surprisingly easy to understand. It was as if the ship was designed to be simple to fly. Jay sat in the pilot's seat. His hands settled on the controls. He took a deep breath and lifted the ship off the ground. It was smooth and quiet. He flew them up, away from the red planet, towards the stars where their home was waiting. In the passenger area, everyone was quiet. The relief was so strong it was exhausting. Specialist Lee was crying softly. Young Kim was just staring at the wall. Sergeant Choi was checking his bruises with a grim smile. Captain Park sat next to Mina. He looked at her for a long time. That thing you did, he said quietly. That was not just Taekwondo. Mina shook her head. No, sir. It was a little of everything. It was what felt right in the moment. That is what they could not understand, Captain Park said. They can learn 1,000 ways to block a punch, but they cannot learn feeling. They cannot learn instinct. He looked out the window at the shrinking red planet below. They think they let us go because we are a contamination, but they are wrong. They let us go because they are afraid. Jay, who was listening from the pilot's seat, felt a shiver go down his spine. Afraid of what, sir? Captain Park turned his gaze from the window and looked at each of them. They are afraid of what they do not know. They have all the data in the universe, but they do not have a human heart. They do not have a human spirit. And today, they learned that they can never, ever predict it. He leaned back in his seat, a tired but proud look on his face. And that, cadets, is a victory greater than any battle. The small collector ship flew smoothly through space. Inside, the silence was heavy. It was the silence of people who had been through too much. Jay focused on the controls, guiding them towards the last known position of their mothership, the KSS Sentinel. The stars outside were steady and calm, a sharp contrast to the storm in his heart. Sergeant Choi was the first to break the quiet. He looked at Mina, who was sitting with her eyes closed. You saved us back there, he said, his voice rough but respectful. I have never seen anything like that. Mina opened her eyes. I just did what was necessary. That wasn't necessary, Choi said with a short laugh. That was a miracle. I was hitting them with all my strength, and it was like hitting a wall. You moved like water. He shook his head in wonder. Engineer Kwan spoke from the back. They let us go because of you. They were afraid of what they didn't understand. Captain Park listened to them. He knew they were right, but a deep worry was growing inside him. This was not over. The collectors had let them go for their own cold, logical reasons. They had called humanity a contamination. What would they do to clean up that contamination? Jay, Captain Park said, his voice cutting through the talk. How long until we reach the Sentinel? Jay checked the alien console. About 20 minutes, sir. The sensors are picking her up now. She is holding position where we left her. A feeling of relief washed over the group. Home was close. But then, a new light began to flash on the control panel. It was a red light Jay did not recognize. A low beeping sound started. What is that? Specialist Lee asked, her voice tight with new fear. I don't know, Jay said, his hands moving over the unfamiliar controls. It is not a system failure. It is an incoming signal. A very strong one. A screen flickered to life in front of them. It did not show a face. It showed lines of complex code, scrolling too fast to read. Then, the robotic voice of the collectors filled the ship. It was the same voice, but now it sounded like it was coming from everywhere at once. The experiment is concluded, the voice said. The variable has been recorded. The sample is now redundant. Captain Park stood up. What are you saying? Identify yourself. The preservation of pure data requires the elimination of corrupted sources. The voice continued, as if it had not heard him. You are a corrupted source. You represent an unpredictable and illogical element. You cannot be allowed to spread. A large shape appeared on the main view screen. It was a collector warship. It was huge, shaped like a dark gray arrowhead. It was between them and the KSS Sentinel. They lied. Jay whispered, his blood turning cold. They never let us go. This was the final test. To see what we would do. And we failed, Sergeant Choi said, his fists clenching. We led them right to our home. On the screen, a bright energy began to build at the front of the collector warship. It was a weapon. It was powering up. It was not aiming at their small ship. It was aiming at the Sentinel. They are going to destroy her, Specialist Lee said, her hand over her mouth. The Sentinel was a strong ship, but it was a survey vessel. It was not built for a fight against a warship of that size. It would be destroyed in a single shot. Jay! Captain Park's voice was sharp and urgent. Is there anything on this ship? Any weapons? Any defenses? Jay scanned the controls frantically. No, sir. Nothing. It is just a transport. They were helpless. They could only watch as their home and everyone on it was about to be erased. Captain Park looked around the small cabin. He saw the faces of his crew. He saw fear and anger and despair. His eyes met Mina's. She was not looking at the screen. She was looking at him. Her face was still calm, but her eyes were asking a question. In that moment, Captain Park understood. The collectors had made a final, fatal mistake. They had given them a ship. Jay, the captain said, his voice suddenly quiet and certain. Turn this ship around. Aim it at the warship. Jay stared at him. Sir, you heard me. Full power. Aim for their bridge. Understanding dawned on Jay's face. It was a desperate, crazy plan. It was a suicide mission. but it was the only move they had left. His hands flew over the controls. The small ship spun around. The engine whined as he pushed it to its maximum power. They shot forward, a tiny speck flying directly towards the giant warship. On the view screen, the collector warship grew larger and larger. The energy at its front glowed brighter, almost ready to fire. The robotic voice came through the speakers again. This time there was a different tone, a hint of confusion. Your action is illogical. You cannot damage this vessel. You will be destroyed. Captain Park did not answer. He held onto his seat as the ship vibrated around them. Brace for impact, Jay yelled. They were seconds away from crashing into the massive warship. The Sentinel was still in its sights, helpless. Then, Mina spoke. Her voice was not loud, but it was clear and steady. Jay, the grenade. Jay, his hands gripping the controls, his heart pounding, looked at her. What? The training grenade, she said, her eyes locked on the warship ahead. They think they know what we will do. They think we will crash. It is the only logical move we have left. So we must do something else. Captain Park understood immediately. Jay, change course. Fly right past them. As close as you can. Jay did not question the order. He pulled hard on the controls. The small ship veered sharply to the side. Instead of crashing into the warship, it shot past its main hull, skimming the surface so close they could see the details of the gray metal. The collector warship, committed to its firing solution on the Sentinel, could not react fast enough. Its large weapons were not designed to hit a small, fast-moving target flying right next to it. As they flew past the bridge of the warship, Sergeant Choi saw what Mina had seen. A small, open port on the side of the warship. It was a maintenance hatch or a sensor array. It was a tiny weakness. Choi looked at the empty, featureless cabin of their ship. He had no weapons, nothing to throw. Then his eyes fell on a heavy metal bar that was part of the ship's frame, loose from the damage they had taken earlier. He ripped it free. He looked at Mina. He did not need to speak. She nodded. Choi went to the ship's rear door. He hit the manual release. The door slid open with a hiss. The air rushed out, and the terrible cold of space poured in. The alarm blared. He held on tight. He saw the open port on the collector warship flash by. It was only visible for a second, with a roar that was swallowed by the vacuum. He threw the metal bar. It was not a perfect throw. It was a desperate, hopeful throw. The bar tumbled end over end through space. It flew straight into the open port. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, deep inside the collector warship, the metal bar smashed into sensitive equipment, caused a power surge, a small explosion, a chain reaction. Lights flickered across the massive warship. The bright energy building at its front wavered, faded, and then died completely. The warship began to list to one side, its systems failing. On the bridge of the KSS Sentinel, the crew saw the small transport ship fly past the giant warship. They saw the warship's weapon power down. They saw it drifting, damaged. A voice came over the comms from the Sentinel. Unidentified transport. This is the Sentinel. We see you. What is your status? Captain Park looked at his crew. He looked at Jay, who was breathing hard. He looked at Choi, who was pulling the door shut. He looked at Mina, who had sat back down and closed her eyes again. He picked up the communicator. Sentinel, this is Captain Park. We are coming home.